All right, so we're doing 5, 9, factoring pattern for ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, c can be positive or negative in this case. The only thing different, see, this looks very similar to our add and multiply one, except we have that a in front. That means we're going to have a number in front, and the only time we've ever had that was when it was a perfect square trinomial. But these aren't necessarily going to be perfect square trinomials, so you are going to be able to solve them and not just write prime. So we are doing this one after we did factor by grouping, because you need to know how to factor by grouping to do this factoring pattern. So let me make sure I can write. Okay, there we go. When we have a coefficient in front of a trinomial, it changes the way it will factor. Okay, because we know when it doesn't have the a, we know how to factor that. Now, the method we will be using to factor these is a version of factoring by grouping, like I just said. Factoring by grouping. So if you have not fully mastered that, you need to keep on working on that, because this will be a little bit difficult for you then. Okay, so it says we will split the middle term into an addition to 2 terms, thus making it a total of 4 terms. So we're going to change it from 3 terms to 4 terms without actually changing the value of the problem. We will then group the first 2 and the last 2. Then we'll proceed like a normal factoring by grouping. So we're just kind of setting it up to be factored by grouping, and then we'll be able to factor it just like that. To determine how to split the middle term, we multiply the coefficient. Oh, I don't know if I have it here. The coefficient of the quadratic term. Ooh, that should be an A. Quadratic term. Okay, we talked about what the quadratic term is. If you see this example right here, that 3m squared is the quadratic term, so the coefficient of it would be 3. And we're going to multiply that with the constant term, which we know is -8. So we do 3 times -8. We will find factors of that number, and they also have to add to the middle term, or the middle coefficient, more specifically. Okay, so we're going to do our examples. So if you don't understand what to do, read what we just wrote, okay? Go back, pause it. Okay, so example 1. So we need to multiply 3, which is the quadratic term coefficient, and we multiply the constant term, which is -8. So that's going to be a -24. So we're going to have to multiply to that number, or find factors of that. 2 numbers that multiply, or 2 factors of -24. We also needed to add to 23, a positive 23. So we're kind of doing very simple, we're kind of using the add multiply right here, right? But it's not going to factor out with those factors, so you have to be careful. So I'm going to be using positive 24 and a -1, because 24 times a -1 is a -24, but 24 minus 1 is 23. So what I'm doing now is I need to make this into 4 terms. So I'm splitting up 23m, and I'm going to write it as 24m minus m, because that's the same as 1m, right? So we have 24m minus m. What does that equal? That equals 23m. So did we change the problem? No, because 23m equals 24m minus m. So I'm just going to bring down the -8 and the 3m squared. So now we changed the trinomial into a 4-term polynomial. So now we can factor by grouping. So I'm going to group these 2, and I'm going to group the negative with it, but that means I have to make this a positive, adding a negative. Okay, so factor out. What do they have in common? 3m. So then that will leave me with m plus 8. What do they have in common? Oh, I need to take out a -1. So I'm going to do m plus 8. Now that I have this, I see that m plus 8 is the same, so that will be my first factor. And then my last factor will be these put together, so that will be 3m minus 1. Again, it doesn't matter which order you put them in as long as you have both of them like that. So that's the answer to number 1. Now on to number 2. Same thing. We need, first let's say, what do we need it to add to? We need it to add to -7. We look at that middle term right there. Now we need it to multiply to 2 times positive 5, which will give me a positive 10. So now I need to think of factors. Okay, so 2 and 5. So you might be able to use some tricks, because if it's multiplying to a positive number, then they both have to be the same sign. But 2 plus 5 will not give me a -7. Actually, I need a -2 and a -5. Now, one thing you might be curious is, when I split them up, does it matter which one I do first? Nope. You'll still, when you factor by grouping, end up getting the same two factors. You'll just have it kind of like you'll have a different one. You might have a different order, but don't worry about it. Doesn't matter which one. So you can do, I'm doing 2n squared, and I'm going to do minus 2n minus 5n plus 5. So again, I split up -7n to -2n minus 5n, because that's the same thing, and I just brought down the 2n squared and the 5. See? So now I can factor by grouping. Now if you did the different order, like -5n minus 2n, that's fine. Okay, and I'm going to add them. So now, we both have a 2n in common, so then we'll have n minus 1 plus, not plus, I need to take out a -5. So then I'll have n minus 1, so we'll get n minus 1 is one of my factors, and then we'll also have 2n minus 5. There you have it. So hopefully you're realizing all these factoring patterns that we previously learned are kind of all helping us to get these, to solve this problem. So last one, so it needs to add to -57, multiply to 10 times a -18, which is a -180. Now guys, I'm not thinking of these off the top of my head. I have already prepped for these, so this would have taken me a little time to figure it out. So I'm just trying not to waste your time. You might need to use a calculator. That's okay, but you're going to end up getting -60 and 3, because -60 plus 3 is a -57. But if you multiply them, you'll get a -180. So I'm going to break this up into -60a plus 3a, because that will still give me a -57a. Bring them down. And now all I need to do is factor by grouping. Oh, kind of crossed that out, I didn't mean to. But since that's a positive, I don't need to put it in the parentheses. If you want to and then put a positive, that's fine too. Okay, so take out the 10a, so I'm left with a minus 6. Take out a positive 3, so I'll be with a minus 6, and that's exactly what we want to get a minus 6, and then 10a plus 3, so, not plus, 10a plus 3. There you have it. Hopefully this is helpful, but you need to know how to add, multiply. You need to know how to factor by grouping. There you go.